church was completely bought into Aristotle, and as a result, Galileo was in trouble with the church, of course, not just for the whole, Earth over the sun business, but also other things like this argument, the things that Aristotle was wrong. You're not allowed to say that. It'd be a mistake for you, and not, with A1 sauce. The one that, is in the Plaza of Flowers, so be careful. So moods of syllogisms, etc. So Aristotle applied this stuff to everything, including ethics. I mean, so if you look at all the different ones, he talks about the gait of animals, the organs, the weather. The weather is absolutely a gorgeous thing to look at. Let's take a look at meteorology. So in this book, he tells you that the stars, for example, are out there and that they're always lit because there's no blockage between the sun and the stars. In other words, the stars are reflecting the light of the sun. I happen to know that's wrong today, right? So as you read through this, and he talks about the origin of the winds, why the winds are blowing, and so on. All this, information, right, is there for you. And by the way, for Aristotle, the sun goes around the earth. Everything goes around the earth. The earth is round, but everything goes around. And by the way, his estimate of the size of the earth is very close, like within 1,000 meters or something close. But there's lots of scientific things that they measured, in order to discover that. But the idea of the winds is that as the things are all moving around the earth, that pushes the winds, and the winds then push things, etc., etc. So feel like finding a seat someplace? That's a nice seat right there. You're free. By the way, he talks about free choice, whether it's voluntary or free. That's a whole different thing. You can be voluntary in doing stuff, but I'll just take a poke at this though before I go on. There's just so much stuff. It's hard to control yourself, I suppose. But the first difficulty is raised by what is called the air. Remember, he's not familiar with what we know about the different kinds of gases that make up the air. That's why he didn't think fish breathed air, because they're underwater. What is a different element? They're obviously not breathing air, although you notice the dolphins did, right? So that's kind of interesting. What are we to take its nature to be in the world surrounding the earth? It's very, very analytic in studying this, but at the same time, he's so limited by essentially being the very beginnings of this kind of analysis that he doesn't really come close at all to what we really know. So as we read through this, it's fascinating to see his approach to things, but at the same time, we realize that he's way off base, really, in a lot of this stuff. But let's get back to the ethics, because oddly, in the ethics, he's not considered very far off base. So he's going to criticize the idealist, Plato. Plato thought the good was one thing. Too abstract for us to be able to understand it from a physical point of view because our body limits us. We're not one with the ideas, so we don't understand it until our soul is released from this prison house of the soul. We're going to be confused about stuff. It looks to us like there's lots of things that are good, but we can't figure out what it is about all of them that makes them good. Aristotle critiques that whole idea and points out there are so many different kinds of good. Everything has a different aim that should be good. The eye sees, a good eye versus a bad eye, and they didn't have glasses, they didn't have all kinds of eye surgery, etc. My wife's eyes are perfect now, thanks to the cataracts were removed and new lenses put in. And she can look at you and know who you are, etc., even from a distance without glasses. It's very strange. Still not used to it, right? But the eye has a particular quality that makes it a good eye. A horse, a good horse. What kind of horse is a good horse? Well, you have lots of different kinds of uses for horses. If I have a stallion and I put it in one of those little kiddie merry-go-rounds, it would be a bad idea, I think. Because people would be losing their children. I had a child that was riding one of your horses. Oh, that might be the one going down the Northern Lake, The kids have good balance? I hope, it depends on the use, so that you can have a different kind of good. And it's ridiculous to think that all of the good things have something in common. And when it comes to man has a certain biology. This guy is a biologist, right? And he thinks that human beings are different than other animals. But why? What makes man different from other animals? My quiz question, by the way, today is, how do you raise a good child? A good child. Now that assumes that there's a good human nature, kind of nature that we would consider good. So what kind of nature makes a particular person a good person? As opposed to, say, a cow. And I know there's lots of different cows.
Aristotle would say the ability to reason.
To reason?
Yes. Because the animals can remember and they can act on their appetites, but they can't control these desires. They can't use their knowledge to make right or wrong choices on their end.
He doesn't even think they can make choices. They can be voluntary, which way do they go, but in a sense he wouldn't think that they are making choices. By the way, of course, who was Aristotle's teacher? Plato. And remember, we talked about Plato's conception of the different kinds of virtues. We have temperance for the, common riffraff. I mean the people that do all the work. We have courage, for the group that becomes the brave, folks that go out and defend us, And then we have the wise, who are the ones who study for the sake of knowing alone, right? So there's a hierarchy of value. It's very clear that the group at the top is the highest valued, right? You need all of the society, but the ones at the top, as far as Plato's concerned, Aristocles is the glory of the best, right? The elite of the best. And what makes them the best? Their interest in knowing things. And Aristotle is a student of Plato, so even though he disagrees on the overall thesis of the ideas, he does accept the virtue idea that what makes man different is that man is the knower. And so our best bet for being fulfilled is knowing things. Right? Now, it's pretty obvious to me why Aristotle would think that, because look at Aristotle's life. What did he spend his whole life doing? Trying to know stuff. Right? So there's no bias here, right? Not at all. Really. I don't think he was into tennis. You know, acing his serves. One of, let's see, who was? So, Brendan, I think, was the one who mentioned this before, and he's not here today. He was reading something and heard or read that someone argued that Aristotle's ethics is really the most appropriate ethics for us today. And that's a good argument. Aristotle's ethics is called virtue ethics or eudaimonian ethics. And one of the philosophers that he mentioned was Alasdair MacIntyre, who they call an American philosopher, but he's actually from Ireland, Scotland. Sorry, Micmac. Sorry, how could I make that mistake? Anybody remember the Micmac shop? No? We used to have a shop down on Fireweed. It was called the Micmac shop. It was actually from the back. You had to get in from the back. And they sold Irish and Scottish things. All my Scottish ties I bought there, except for one that a friend of ours sent us from Scotland. But in any case, they call him an American philosopher because he spent most of his career really in the United States in various places. And in one of his books, the one that's called After Virtue, which is why I had that pulled up, he argues that ethics in America right now are totally screwed up. But the best bet for each of us as Americans is Aristotle's ethics. So I would do a quick summary. Let me do it this way. I found this, so. Another one? No, this one. So I use what I call a cognitive map. I'm not the only one that does that. It's the idea of mapping ideas physically on a chart so that you could see their relationships. It's a little bit easier than just an abstract way of doing it. And I think of my map is organized. The north, or the top, is certitude, certainty. The south, or the bottom, is uncertainty. The left I think of as the self, the right as the community. And so if I'm born, all of us, everyone here was born, none of us came out of a test tube yet. And so at birth, I think of us as kind of traveling on this as Americans, in this direction. Might normally go across the top here, grow up in a home that loves you, cares for you, gives you everything you need, gives you good training, good socialization skills, all that stuff. But it might be very duty-based. It might be a society, a home, a group that's focused on a particular right and wrong set of systems. We have lots of folks in the United States that come from that perspective. And so you would normally be taken as you age right on across to what I would consider fundamentalism, in the sense that there are certain fundamental principles that you absolutely hold to, right? You might think of that as, that all life is sacred, except for the ones that I kill for food and the people that I kill because they were bad people or they were enemies. But otherwise, you know, every sperm is sacred. Every sperm is sacred.
It's a fertilized egg.
Nobody knows that song. That's terrible. Every sperm is sacred. Nobody knows that one? Holy shit. Okay, forget it then. I won't use it. Or should I play it?
No, I think we can have a listen to it after class. Seems like a homework assignment.